Good afternoon. My name is Christine Torres, and I am the Assistant Director for the Pioneer Center for Student Excellence, and I work on the Houston campus. Today's workshop is Techniques for Taking Useful Organized Notes. So I want us to think of how you would rate your note-taking skills. And we're going to do that by doing a quick poll through Zoom. So you're going to see a couple of questions pop up on your screen. Please go through these questions. There's only 3 questions and answer. Thank you for just joining us. I have a quick poll on the screen. If you just want to review the questions and answer, and we're going to go over this. Give it a few more seconds. I'm going to wrap up our poll. All right, we've got some answers coming in. And we are asking 3 questions that relate to how would you rate your note-taking skills? All right. So let's look at what these results say. It tells us about 82% of you here today feel that you know how to take notes. 18% feel like they do not. And then, do you enjoy taking notes? This is pretty 50-50, right? We're at a 45 to 55%. It's not something we like doing, but it is something that's important to do. And is it hard for you to decide what notes to take, what to take notes on? Again, we are at a 50% yes, 9% no, and then 41% it depends. It really does depend. It depends on the content, it depends on the material, it depends on your mood, it depends on a lot of things, okay? So what we're going to talk about today is just information that's going to help you get through this process of taking notes. So these are our questions that we just answered. What I want you to do is I want you to rate how you feel your note-taking skills are on a scale of 0 to 10, 10 being perfect, 0 being we need some work. I want you to give yourself a number and drop it in the chat. Where do you think your note-taking skills are? Okay, got a 3, a 5, 6 5s, 7s, 4. I take too many. Yes, that's the whole part with struggling on what to write, right? What to take down, what's important. Got some 6s, we've got some 5s. An 8, I would like to be more concise. Great, thanks, Martha. I've got a 4. It is difficult to decide what to take notes on. So we're going to kind of review that process. Oh, somebody put a breakdown with paper 9 with digital material 3. You know what I would say? Ditch the digital. At least right now during the semester. Maybe in between semesters, work on your digital. But right now you're focusing on content, what to write, and then you're also focusing in on a new technique on a tablet, on a computer. It can get cumbersome, it can get confusing. I would say stick to what you know, especially in the areas where you have a lot of information to process. So remember your numbers, remember where you're at. We're going to come back to these at the end of the presentation, okay? If you're just now joining us, feel free to use the chat, your emojis, or private message me or take your mic off to ask a question. Excuse me. All right, here's an activity we're going to work on right now. I want you to take out a sheet of paper, a blank sheet of paper, and I want you to write today's date, the day of the week, and the title of this presentation. 3 things. You're going to write today's date, the day, and the title of this presentation. Okay. So now that we've written on this information, What would happen if you put paper in your folder, in your desk, in your backpack? If you put this paper away right now, what would happen? Do you think you would be able to recall the information that we're going to discuss today? Do you think if you don't write anything else on this paper today, if this is all you write, do you feel that you would be able to retain the key points? You're going to lose it. You're going to forget about it. Yes. Do you think you'll be able to recall key information if you don't write it down? No. This is why it's important that we use some form of note-taking, and I'm going to show you different techniques for reading, attending lectures, and then the physical note-taking process. But I want you to understand that throughout everything we are going to present today, you're not going to stick to one method. You're not going to stick to one strategy. You're going to combine these strategies in a way that works best for you. And it's going to depend on the content. It's going to depend on the material, the format. There's going to be several different things in play. But as long as you have these tools, then you will know what to use when you need them, okay? All right, so let's talk about some benefits of note-taking. Who would like to share why it's important to take notes? What are the benefits? Okay, somebody said reviewing. Okay, recalling information, being able to use them on quizzes on Canvas. Great. It helps you absorb information. Better retention. Keyword, yes, retention. So let's look at a few more benefits. It forces you to pay attention. It keeps you alert and engaged. If you force yourself to take notes, you're more inclined to be engaged with the speaker, the video, the material you're reading. So definitely helps to keep you engaged and alert. It helps to increase your understanding. This is the retention and recalling information. It also helps us learn and retain information, and it supports our memory. So, when should we take notes? I have a couple of examples. Let me see if anybody can think of a couple others. When should we be taking notes? During lectures? When you're reading a book? You should take notes anytime during this meeting. I love it. It is important to practice active listening, active reading, active watching, and using your critical thinking skills whenever new information is presented to you, or information that's going to be on an exam, information that you're expected to teach to somebody else. This is why we take notes. So it could be in lab when we're reading, watching a video, studying on our own, attending a training. So anytime there's information you feel that you're going to need moving forward, and you're going to need to retain it, that's when we take notes. So let's talk about preparing to read. I want to talk about a few strategies before we actually get into what we do when we do read. There is a strategy called chunking. Chunking is a process where you break larger projects into smaller, manageable tasks and give yourself deadlines. If you look at your syllabus and your syllabus states you have to read chapter 14, and chapter 14 has 100 pages, this is something I would recommend that you break up. You chunk it. You might do 50 pages one day, 50 pages another day. If you need to space it out more, maybe you do 25 pages over 4 days. This is chunking, and I encourage you to use this so that you don't get frustrated when you have to sit and read a chapter that's 100 pages long. The next strategy, is the Pomodoro technique. Has anybody heard of Pomodoro technique before? So the Pomodoro technique is a technique that you use to help you stay focused on a task. So step one, you identify the task. So if you're going to be reading, you're going to be writing an essay, whatever you're going to be doing, you're going to identify the task and you're going to set your timer for 25 minutes. Your goal is to focus on that task for 25 minutes and until your timer goes off. Then you take a 5-minute break, you do another 25 minutes, and you keep doing this. Like if you can do 2, if you can do 3, that's fine. And when you need a longer break, you take a 15-minute break. This 15-minute break should really be a chance for you to take care of you, not to go in and go wash dishes if you're at home, not to go and put clothes in the laundry. This is for you to take care of you, okay? You're gonna take 15 minutes to do that and then start back over again. So these 2 strategies, chunking and Pomodoro, can help you as you prepare to read. Now, this is another strategy, and it is called the SQ3R method. Has anybody heard of this SQ3R method? So our SQ3R method stands for survey, question, read, recite, and review. I'm going to be showing you or going through these 5 steps in a document that I found from the Appalachian State University. And I'm also going to send this document to you at the end of the presentation. So your goal is really to focus in on what we're going to be covering and not trying to write everything down because you're going to get an exact copy of this, okay? So let's look at the SQ3R. SQ3R starts off with step 1. This is where you survey your material. You're going to first start out by, this should only take a few minutes depending on how much information you have to read, but you're going to review any headings and subheadings within the material. You're going to pay attention to words that may be bolded or in italics. You're going to look for new words that you might not have known prior to and identify what those definitions are. You might look at maps, charts, diagrams, just anything that's new. If you have course objectives in the beginning of the chapter or a chapter summary, read that. It's going to give you an idea of what to expect because in step 1, all we're doing is surveying. So you've used this before, but yes, what it's called. Good, that was on our other ones. Those were strategies. Sorry, I was reading the chat. Step 2. You're going to question. When you question, what you're going to do is you are going to process the material with the understanding of where am I, okay? If you are in our sociology program, how is this going to impact me as a sociologist? If you in our DPT program, how is this going to support me as a DPT? How is this going to support me as a nurse? Whatever it is, I need you to own it, okay? This is going to help you with the understanding of this is how it's going to apply to me. Now, if you're still working on your basics, it's not really going to apply to your long-term future, right? Like government and history, that's to make you that well-rounded student, but we still have to understand, why is it important for me to learn this? What information do I need to get from here? You're going to turn your titles, headings, and subheadings into questions. And you're going to have these questions to answer will help keep your mind engaged with the reading material. So you're going to be writing these questions down. What is? How does this impact this? You're going to ask yourself these questions so when it comes time to reading the material, you have questions to answer. Step 3. This is where we go through and we read the material. You're going to answer the questions that you formulated in step 2. You're going to take note of difficult items. So if you are reading and you don't understand what you are reading, please resist the urge to go back and reread the paragraph, to go back and reread the page, to go back and reread the sentence. This is not the time to do this. Your goal is to sit here and read the material to get through the material. If there's something you don't understand, you can annotate your text. And annotation is you might put a question mark, you might put a star, you might put a sad face, whatever relates to you going back and picking up on that material later. You might write on your notes, page 42, question mark, like I need to come back to that because I didn't understand that, but you're going to keep reading, okay? You're going to take your breaks as needed. So hopefully we're doing the Pomodoro as we're going through this, and we're going to go to step 4. Step 4 is where we talk through those difficult items. Now is your time to go back and reread, to understand, to do some research. We do this at the end. You're going to write summaries in your own words. So you're going to create summaries in your own words. You can do this after each Pomodoro, after each page, after each paragraph, after each topic. The key is to stay engaged, whatever works for you. You're going to go through and highlight maybe things that were important, things that stood out for you, things that you're still struggling with, but you're going to do that sparingly, right? Your goal is not to go back and highlight your entire text. The last part is review. The process of reviewing your notes and annotating in the text this is the process that you have to do over and over. So you've got to do it maybe, if you're breaking up your readings into 2 parts, when you read and you review, you answer your notes. On day 2, you should do a refresher and read the rest of your notes. So we're picking it up so that it's not the first time that you've read the information. Okay. Any questions about SQ3R? Okay. So we're going to go on to our next slide, which is now preparing for lecture. So this next part is broken into 3 sections. We're going to talk about preparing before lecture, what to do during lecture, and what to do after lecture. So there's going to be 3 parts to this, okay? Before lecture, know what will be covered. This means you have gone through and read. If you did not have time to read, you have gone through and skimmed, okay? At least if you do that surveying part, then you have a little bit more background information to step into your lecture. Know what's covered. Print your syllabus, print any PowerPoints, anything that you're going to need to take to class, because then you don't have to take as many notes. So if you are fortunate enough to have a class with PowerPoints, take those in with you. So then you can use those to take your notes on. Then you don't feel like you have to grasp everything that's being said in lecture. Next, you want to review and read the material, and we would do that with the SQ3R process. You're going to be building those questions. So anything that you are unsure about, anything that might be new to you, ask questions, write those down. So when you get to lecture, you can answer those questions or have an opportunity to ask those questions, okay? You want to take notes of items you did not understand, and you want to come to lecture prepared. If you feel that you struggle with note taking once you're in lecture, if you have missed step 1, at least step 1, it's going to feel difficult for you. If you've come to lecture and done 1 and 2, you're going to feel a little bit more prepared. So the more work you put in before class, the easier it would be for you to get through lecture, because now it will not feel like we've got to take down all this information, because we've already done that and spent some time reviewing the material before lecture. During lecture. So what should I take notes on? So you've already started the process of taking notes when you previewed and reviewed. So during lectures, you want to pay attention to maybe some key concepts and main points, any examples that your professor might state, any conversations that might be happening on the side are also considered examples, any definitions or new vocabulary word that you didn't pick up on when you read, any references that were provided. So if they say in chapter 2, you can go to graph this, write that graph down. Don't flip through your book, just write it down. Anything you didn't understand, so anything that continues to be difficult for you or something that's new, and then your thoughts, questions, and ideas. So it's something similar to the SQ3R, but now we're in class and there should be less information that is new and difficult to understand. This is also your opportunity to ask questions or listen in for those items that might have been difficult for you, okay? You want to be sure that when you are writing this information down, you are either paraphrasing or summarizing. If you are writing word for word, that is not going to benefit you. When you paraphrase and when you summarize, this is a part of active learning because it is forcing you to think of another way to relate the material, to present the material, to learn the material. So paraphrasing is when you put it in your own words and the meaning stays the same. When you summarize, this is a condensed version of the author's words, and it includes main points and main ideas. So be sure you're doing some form of this during your note taking, and you don't find yourself just writing sentence after sentence after thought after thought after thought. Listen, write, or paraphrase or summarize. Listen, paraphrase, or summarize, okay? Use symbols. Whenever you can, use symbols to cut down on the time that you're spending writing your notes. For example, if you're trying to say etc., like if they're giving examples and you already know what they are, etc. Information, abbreviate it. If you're in a government class and they repeat the word government, don't write the full word, write GOVT. Write a capital G. Whatever you know in your notes is going to keep you remembering what you're writing down. If one of your classes has to do with patients, put a capital P. Put a P with the circle. Whatever symbol you want to create, personalize it so that you know what this information is and you don't get stuck writing a full word. Feel free to use abbreviations. You can use the less than, the equal, you can use arrows. There are different abbreviations that you could use. I know, for instance, when I write notes, I write the triangle, and the triangle means change, like there's a change that's going to happen. So I use that so that I can connect the cause with the effect. So here's the cause, it's going to change, and this is the effect. Would anybody like to share any symbols or abbreviations or any shortcuts that they use when they take notes? BC for because, yes. Think about when you're texting, right? OTW, on the way. We know what these mean. Incorporate these into your notes. With, for the with, yes. Star for important, yes. If you put a little star, it's something that's important. Yes, incorporate these in your notes and they will help you visually retain the information, okay? Thank you for sharing. Without, yes. I've also used the, for no, I've used the circle with the line through it, means like no. Good, good, good. So now parts, oh, PTS for patients, good. We've got some abbreviations going on. Awesome. After lecture. After lecture, it is important that you review your notes and touch up anything that needs touching up, right? So if there's something you don't understand, if you need to go back in and figure out what a definition is, if there's an acronym that you didn't know and you need to spell it out, figure out what that is and touch up your notes. So review your notes at the end. Then you should clarify items with graphs, mind maps, and definitions. So we're going to get into mind maps at the end of the presentation. We're going to get into some charting and some graphs at the end of the presentation. But maybe you've done the SQ3R now in your lecture and you still don't understand stuff. So that's the second time. The third time you're going to review this information might be using graphs and mind maps, okay? And we'll talk about that a little bit later. Identify items that need following up. So if you've identified something that you weren't able to understand or grab a full concept in your readings and in your lectures, you now have information to take to a study group, a review session, a meeting with your professor. So follow up as needed, and then store your notes. You have put so much work into taking these notes that it is important that you find a way to organize and store your notes. If you're doing it digitally, be sure that you're saving by dates and you're putting key information in like chapters, things like that. Likewise, if you are writing on paper, make sure you're using a binder. Make sure you have some type of filing system. Make sure that your work is being utilized. If, for instance, you got caught off guard and you forgot your notebook and you came to class and you wrote it on a sheet of paper, but you know this sheet of paper is going to get lost, take a picture of it. Keep it in your phone. We take our phones with us almost everywhere. So now you have this information, but if you have it on your phone, you can also save it to your Google Drive, your student Google Drive, to be able to refer to later, okay? So store your notes. So what we're going to do now is we're going to look at different methods for note taking. The first one we're going to review is called the Cornell Method. Has anybody heard of the Cornell Method? The Cornell Method is where you take your paper and divide it or fold it about 3/4 of the way, going like you see here in the picture. And on the left-hand side, which is the smaller side, you're going to write keywords or key questions. On the right-hand side, you're going to write the responses, the definitions, maybe important information that you need to be recalled later. And the bottom portion of the paper, you're going to write a summary. This works when you need to use this as a study guide, because you could simply fold it and use it like as a flashcard. It helps when you're trying to practice active recall, which is a process of recalling information without looking at the answer first. I'll get to that a little bit later as well. So Cornell is one method. This is mind mapping. The mind mapping method is where you take a central concept. So today we're looking at mind mapping. Mind mapping has 5 areas, and you see those 5 branches. Then mind mapping divides even further. So if we look at planning, there's projects, there's goals, and there's priorities. This is where you're able to break up what you're needing to learn into a more visual presentation. Sometimes exaggerated pictures, maybe some drawings, anything like that can help you retain this information. So if you were studying something in nursing that had a side effect on a patient, maybe that causes them just something uncomfortable, then maybe a sad face. So then you can relate to that. If it's a star, use your same symbols that you've developed in your note-taking process. Use those to help you elaborate on the ideas and the concepts within your mind maps. Excuse me. Next is our charting method. Charting gives you the liberty of being able to use this either horizontally or vertically. In this case, at the top, we've got our drugs, our drug classes, our drug effects, what it's used for, and then any side effects. And we're listing all this information here. This might be a good visual representation of how to retain this information. And what I would suggest is pay attention to what's different. If we know that they are all the same, but maybe one is different because of a different side effect, then you focus in on what is different. You don't have to retain that all of these medications have the same, whatever you're looking at. Focus in on what is different. Likewise, you can use this chart. You can use the charting method for any concepts or theories you're trying to get through. It just helps you categorize it in a way that makes sense. You're not restricted here with how many columns or rows you can use. It might just be 2 concepts that you need to understand, and it's a visual representation of how to process that information. Our next method is the outline method. The outline method usually involves indentions, maybe Roman numerals, maybe physical numbers, maybe the alphabet. It's really up to you. This is not your chance to learn Roman numerals. So if you don't know them, just eliminate them, right? Start off with one, start off with a bullet, start off with stars, indent. When you use the outline format, you are using this to break up your thoughts and maybe sequences. So if we have a title and under the title, we have two subjects, then we can tell because we've got a number one and a number two. Under subject one, maybe there's 3 items that we need to look at. So that's where we describe it as A, B, and C. So the outline method is not similar to mind mapping. It's just a different way of presenting the information that makes sense for you. Now, during lectures, and it might be difficult to stick with the format, but if you go back and update parts of your notes that you're struggling with or break them up a little bit further, then you might want to go in and try the outline method with that. And then we have the sentence method. The sentence method is just, we're just writing sentence after sentence after sentence, thought after thought, okay? Key to all of these methods is finding what works best for you. So I'm going to ask a question. Can we mix these methods? Yes. I welcome you to mix these methods. I welcome you to not stay with one. I welcome you to try all of the methods in different classes, right? Mind mapping might help you when you're working in A and P, but maybe the graph, the charting helps you when you're working in statistics. So mix it up and use what works for you. When you are taking notes, another good rule of thumb is when you transition thoughts, so whether it be in the sentence method or whether it be here in the outline method, when you're transitioning thoughts, try to skip a line. So in this example, I would skip a line or a couple of lines between C and number 2. That leads me to believe that this is something different, okay? When you are in, if we look at this outline method again, so we have subject 1 and subject 2, well, skipping line in between those helps us because it lets us know that there's a different subject that's coming up, but it also allows you space to come back in and fill in if you need to add more information later. During your note-taking process, if you get distracted, if you focused in on something else, and by the time you realize it, the professor is on another subject, it is okay. It happens. Skip a couple of lines, write a question mark, because you know that means you need to go back and finish that, and pick up where everybody else is at that moment, okay? So just remember that. So we talked about choosing a method. It's going to depend on your learning style. It's going to depend on how much time you put into this and how much time you have. And maybe if you're struggling with the particular content. So maybe writing, the outline method is good enough for you. But if you're struggling in an area, then turn around and do a chart. Turn around and do a mind map. Break it up into something that makes more sense to you. So we've done our review before, we've done our reading before lecture. We've attended lecture. Now we're at the review part, okay? This was step 5 in our reading and then the end of the lecture. So we're out of lecture and it's time to review. Has anybody seen this or heard of the forgetting curve? So the forgetting curve states that the forgetting curve shows how learned information slips out of our memories over time unless we take action to keep it there. So if you look at this graph, when you first learn something on day 1 and less, you are at 100%. At the end of day 1, it drops down to 80%. If you do not review that information again, by day 3, you are at 60%. However, if you review the information by day 3, you're at 80%. So reviewing this information, if you review it on day 3, you're at 100%. And then again, if you review it again at day 6, you're at 100%. So your chance of forgetting the information decreases the more you review the information. So if you have time to go back in and review your notes, review your questions, create a mind map, review your mind map, this is repetitive action that is helping you to retain this information. So there's a strategy called active recall. Has anybody heard of active recall? So active recall is a strategy that helps you retain information over time. If you look at number one, new information enters your brain to get stored in working memory only for a few seconds. So this is that learning curve, right? So it stays in working memory. From working memory, it only goes into short-term memory if you review it. And from short-term memory, it will only go into long-term memory if it is recalled enough times. So if you've ever been on a test, so let me know if this has happened to you. Have you ever been in a test and you read the question and you quite don't understand what the answer should be? So you read A, B, C, D, and then you're like, sounds like it's A or B, or it sounds like it's B or C. Has that ever happened to anyone? Yes. That may be because you were either stuck in working memory or short-term memory. So active recall is a process of you're able to read the test question and solve it without reading the A, the B, the C, and the D. How do we get to active recall? Active recall, you can get there through some of the strategies we've already talked about, like creating those mind maps, but maybe creating true-false questions, maybe creating fill-in-the-blank questions, maybe answering your case scenarios at the back of your chapter, maybe answering all those questions that you created at the beginning of the chapter. Those are all ways to keep you active with learning the material. Does anybody have any ways that they have practiced active recall? There's a lot more. Anybody ever used flashcards? Quizlets, yes. Quizlets is an app that you can create your own questions in. Anything else anybody uses? Anki. Yes, I've heard of Anki. Making up stories and mnemonics. Oh, Camila, I hear you. You are connecting this information to things that you can recall later. So it sounds like you're a visual person. And making mnemonics, yes. Mnemonics is another way to retain information. All of this is active recall. If you can remember these things, making a dance routine out of the study material. Oh, I've got to see that one. There's also a process of, say for instance, you are you're in your room, and your room has a lamp, your room has a TV, your room has a fish tank, your room has a desk and a chair. So if you need to remember items, you can say, my fish tank means this, my TV means this, my desk and chair go together as this process. So then when you're on your test, you're trying to remember this information. You're like, my bedroom, my TV means this, my fish tank means this, my desk and chair mean this. So you can associate things to memories and stories. Awesome. Anybody else want to share any active recall strategies they may have? Well, thank you for sharing. So we've gone over a lot of information, but we're not done yet. Based off of some of the information that you started this presentation with and some of the tools that you've learned today, do you think your note-taking skills will increase? Yes. Yes, I hope so. They will, Bridget. I believe in you. They will. So who wants to share some things that they think they can do to move from that 3 to that 6, to move from that 5 to that 7? Who wants to share some things that you can do moving forward? Definitely will. Awesome. What is something you'll put into practice now that you've heard the things you've heard today? Create some mind mapping, making my notes more creative and visual. Yes, writing questions. If you have not utilized more creative notes, if you have not utilized any of those softwares that were mentioned, so Anki and Quizlets, those are things you can do. Right now, I spend a lot of time taking notes while reading, but I think focusing on the reading and then taking notes can help me use my time wisely. I love it, Martha. I'm doing my little happy dance for you. Yes, we have to get to that point where we realize what is not working for us and what we can do to change that. So you're not alone, Martha. A lot of people really do spend a lot of time taking notes. It's okay if that is your strength, but what are you doing with those notes afterwards? So if that's your process, the key is reviewing, adding that review to that process, okay? So we're gonna do one more activity. And for this next activity, I am gonna ask that you use some 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever skills you have learned today to take notes on a short video, okay? So let me stop sharing really quickly because I need to share with my audio. Share with audio. Okay, here we go. Let me know if you can't hear it.
Now, why would we slow down on the first sentence of a paragraph? As you probably already know, the first sentence of a paragraph tends to be the main idea or topic sentence of that paragraph. It's not always the case, but most of the time, maybe 80% of the time or more, the first sentence is the main idea of the paragraph. So it's important to slow down just a little bit here to make sure you don't miss that important sentence. There are a variety of ways you can adjust your reading speed while going through the material. Slowing down on the first sentence of a paragraph is just one way to do it. If you're a student and you're reading something very important that's likely to be on the final exam, you might slow down a little bit through that section and speed up through material you're already familiar with. Or you might be reading a novel, and at the beginning of the story you might slow it down a bit, only to speed up through the middle and slowing it back down near the end. Again, the key here is that you adjust your reading speed. At some points you should speed up, and at other points you should slow down. But you should never read at the same speed through all of the material. Slowing down on the first sentence of a paragraph is a good rule of thumb that works with most types of material, and this is an easy way for you to improve your comprehension with little to no practice. If you have a moment to do some reading right now, try it out for yourself.
Okay, told you it's going to be a short video. I'm going to push pause really quickly. And before we go into the feedback, I want to let you know that as TWU student, you have access to LinkedIn Learning. This is one piece of a training or a video about reading. It's called speed reading. And it goes through some information here about increasing your reading speed. It breaks it down. So if you don't want to read all of this or watch all of this, you can just do reading with groups of words or simple drills you can practice to boost reading speed. You don't have to do this all in one setting. How memory works, the memory principles, talks about the 80-20 principle of reading, tips for reading magazine articles, how to deal with charts and diagrams. So read it at your own pace or as you need, but it helps you with increasing your reading speed. What we just listened to today was a key indicator for adjusting your reading speed. So you don't always have to read at the same speed, okay? That's kind of the takeaway. So I'm going to go ahead and get out of this so that we can go back to our presentation. And now what I want to do is I want to ask, how did your note-taking go? What strategies did you use? Anybody like to share like what they used in their strategies as they took notes on this short video? Did anybody use symbols or abbreviations. You made some symbols. Awesome. Well, there was increase and decrease. So you could have used arrows, right? What else? Did anybody find that they were still taking a lot of notes? Active listening and bullet point list. Great. So you did a little bit of the outline method. Good. And practice active listening. Did anybody summarize or paraphrase? So somebody drew it out to simplify and visualize the steps. Sounds like a visual technique. I love it. So I think going into this activity, knowing that active listening is important, different ways to take notes are important, also helps. Somebody did a summary to the slide that said to slow down, reading with 3 times in a list. Perfect. Yeah, so you will start to see that as you start using these techniques, they're really going to change your perceptions on how effective you take notes. And I'm really, really confident that it'll work out for you. So just before we wrap up our session, I want to let you know that we do have 2 more workshops coming up, one on March the 8th and one on April the 5th. If you would like to reach if you would like to visit our YouTube channel, you can look at our past videos. They are under Student Success Workshops. So they are right here. And I am going to stop the recording at this point, and I'm going to open the floor for any questions, okay?